Sports presents Benning Bites with Damon Benning. Benning Bites with Damon Benning.
Another episode of Benning Bites. Appreciate you folks being a part of what we're doing. Apple, Google, Spotify. Just remember, all of us need you. So we appreciate it. However you get us, just keep making sure we're a part of what you're doing. Fantastic show coming up today. We've got draft stuff. We've got Mike Schaefer. We've got Mike Sauter, who is in Bryan, Texas. We got a lot going on. And so we appreciate you guys and gals being a part of what we do. Great discussions the last couple of days. Talking with Ravi. It started, we played the Giannis clip about failure and how he viewed the season. And there just a lot of good conversations were birthed from that.
There's no failure in sports.
Yeah, I mean, that was part of it. Shane, play the little part of the clip where he asked the reporter about getting raises and taking care of his family and things like that.
Do you view this season as a failure?
Oh, my God.
He's obviously frustrated.
You asked me the same question last year, Eric. Okay. Do you get the promotion every year on your job? No, right? So every year you work is a failure. Yes or no?
That was the start of it. And Ravi took it multiple steps further. Even got me thinking, because I wasn't really vibing at first with kind of where it was going about what we want in our athletes and sports and how context matters. And he brought up an interesting point about why we're drawn towards sports in terms of failure and how athletes, maybe they don't see it ahead of time or real time, but how fans gravitate towards how they deal with the different stages in their career, right? He referenced what I would call my egg theory, where when I said, hey, I've said this for years, whatever's in you when you get squeezed is basically who you are, the essence of who you are, and pressure being a privilege. And I think he talked about why we gravitate towards sports, and we like to see that kind of stuff come out because the fan in us, it's revealed to us what we're actually cheering for. I just thought it was interesting, just to take it one step further, how when you speak something, because I talk about speaking things into existence all the time, once you give something a label, a success, a failure, you may answer to a certain name. Hey, you're a ding-dong, and you answer to that, or whatever the name is. Like, you give that word power, and it actually has meaning, and it doesn't have to. And so I always wonder, it just got me thinking, right? When you talk about the word failure, is it compartmentalized? Is it all encompassing? Is it relative? And if it is, which I think it is relative to expectations, what do you do with it? Because that's the thing, right? We heard Coach Rule. He told a story about at the coaches clinic, Nebraska High School Coaches Clinic. And he said the same thing at the Metro Coaches Clinic, where he said, listen, I absolutely 100% believe we're going to be successful. This is Nebraska. We're going to win at Nebraska. But if we don't on the schedule that I want to, there's one thing I can tell you for sure. I'm going to own it. And it got me thinking with the conversation that we had on yesterday's show. Is ownership ultimately what we're after, right? Do you just want people, instead of really needing a pound of flesh, is ownership just what you really want? Just to come out and say what we actually think or confirm what we actually think? And is that enough to compartmentalize? Because if Nebraska goes 5-7, some people would consider that a failure. But the context in which they went 5-7 would matter, obviously, as would ownership, right? An explanation on where we are, where we thought we were, what actually happened. Would that change the meaning of the word failure. I look at Will Bolt, right, fresh off of South Dakota State, and the way that this season has gone, especially with midweek games, and they have officially played their way out of an at-large bid, and now they've got to run the table. Would Coach Bolt consider that a failure? And I think defining the criteria absolutely matters. It does. Like, well, if they win the Big Ten tournament or somehow get to the postseason or qualify for it, I don't think anybody's talking about it. They're not. But if you don't, and then you go back to the original vantage point of how the season started, it may change the definition and the meaning. Or what if they provided insight in terms of how it wound up the way that it did? Well, you know what, DB, this pitcher didn't manifest the way he did mature the way that we wanted to, just situational hitting, and we got these explanations. Would that suffice? Would that change the definition? See, I don't know. But I always try to build sequentially on how I want you guys to learn and what my goal is in terms of doing this job, and that's promote individual thinkers, free thinkers, where you're empowered with some details and you can do with them what you will. But we on the show remove ourselves from having ownership over the way you feel, because we want to empower you to feel that way. Would it change the way that you felt about how you viewed the season if Coach Bold or Coach Rule or Coach Hoiberg or Coach Cook or Coach McDermott or Sean Payton in Dallas, whomever, just owned it? Said, hey, listen, I know there's a lot of expectation levels. We gave up a first rounder in order to get me. I hadn't finished my contract. Appreciate the Saints, and everybody's thinking, oh man, Dallas, or this is or Denver. I'm sorry, not Dallas, Denver. This is just Sean Payton's show, and yeah, Russell Wilson, we're going to get you back. And so I know what the expectation level is, and if it doesn't happen, and Sean Payton gives you ownership or gives an explanation, because I think that's the difference between an excuse and an explanation is ownership. If Sean Payton owned it and talked about what went wrong behind the scenes, would that change the way you feel? I never know. But remember, I'm also the same guy that kind of rolls the dice, where I think I would be the type of head coach, and I've had some successes and some failures, where I would just try to tell the story. Hey, I know this is what you think, this is maybe whatever, and I would just kind of tell you real time what was happening. And some people call that chasing ghosts. Some people get into whether public is privy to those kinds of things or not, and you don't want to get into explaining everything. But I think every now and again, just giving a summation of how and why things are the way they are would go a long way. And it's a two-way street. Remember, I talked a couple weeks ago about the fans being able to change their perspective in terms of understanding the job as the head football coach of the University of Nebraska. Does understanding Coach Rule and that staff's perspective change the way that your fandom, right? Does it give you a snapshot into what's going on? Because I just like individual accountability. I like ownership. And I think it's all we ever really want, because we're such a forgiving society if there's ownership. We're extremely forgiving. And we like second chances, and we like success stories. So why do you think people aren't more forthright like Giannis was? Remember, Giannis, if you know his story, he's already exceeded any expectations that he ever had as a kid growing up. He's been an MVP. He's been a world champion. I don't know if there's anything that he's going to do going forward relative to his frame of reference as a kid growing up the way he and his brother did, that he would consider that a failure. Does him saying what he said yesterday or 2 days ago to the reporter quantify that for you? Or is there really failure in sports? I always think it boils down to vantage point. And the real freedom and being for other people is understanding other people's vantage points. Doesn't mean you have to agree. It doesn't. So hear my heart. I'm not saying you have to agree with other people's vantage points. But the more that we can share and glean insight on where people are coming from, it frees you up to form educated opinions as opposed to just feeling a certain way because it does or doesn't match up with the way you think. I'm telling you, there's growth in that. So it's just a lot of food for thought. And not everybody's going to have Giannis's perspective, right? You ask LeBron, he's going to say something different. If you ask Russell Wilson, he's going to say something different. If you ask Dak Prescott or, John Calipari, Kentucky just getting drugged the last couple of days on TNT, right? Like, success and failure, you may say, knowing Cal's vantage point, maybe you think differently. I don't know. But it's just food for thought. And remember, on the heels of Jerry Springer passing away, not to steal a line, but to borrow a line, just make sure you take care of yourself and each other. It's another episode of Benning Bites.